and it is entitled Lear Complex, the Second Childishness, the Time of Oblivion and Thunder. So we have about 20 minutes for the talk, is that?
Yeah, it's all right. Can I start now?
Is the sound not good?
We're doing this.
And am I being shown actually via a laptop?
There you go. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you pretty well, but can you also hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Yes.
Let me get the volume up a little further.
Great. So am I being shown actually via a laptop or something at the moment?
You're on screen.
Oh, yeah. And good. Actually, it is Loughborough. Loughborough is a small city in the UK, but it has a very big university. Very, very unfortunate that I'm not there actually like last year, and there are some problems. But fortunately, I should thank the Kristeva Circle that kindly agreed to put me in the proceedings. I'm based in the UK. I'm originally Iranian, and at the moment I'm in Oslo, in Norway. And I saw Professor Kristeva yesterday in a conference in the University of Oslo, and I told her she thought I was about to fly to the US. At the night, but I told her that I had some visa issues, but hopefully I'm going to present my paper via Skype. So thank you again. The title of my lecture, before that I should say that my PhD was on Kristeva. Actually, it was the application of Kristeva's theories to some of William Shakespeare's plays. And that was the reason I chose the UK actually to get my PhD. Study my PhD. The title of my paper for this year's conference is Lear Complex, the Second Childishness, the Time of Oblivion and Thunder. After enumerating the 6 stages of an individual's life, melancholy Jacques, in one of the most famous Shakespearean speeches, calls the 7th stage the last sin of all, which he believes is second childishness and mere oblivion, sans taste, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Although Jacques is immediately contrasted in the play in As You Like It, and his negative outlook regarding the 7th stage obviously cannot be applied to As You Like It, which is a comedy. But actually one can say that in King Lear, Shakespeare psychologizes Jacques' familiar trope of old age in second childishness. In giving his daughters control over the extended body that is his kingdom, Lear would make them his mothers, deliberately putting himself in the position of infantile need from which he will experience the rest of the play. By the second childishness, I mean when an adult becomes the target of repressed maternal desires that having been with them since early childhood. Here I will precisely, and so you can find more in my paper, but I try to be short and not to bore you. I will talk about the psychoanalytic impulses behind Lear's relation with his daughters, which I try to be short, and then I will explore Kristeva's theories that can shed light on Lear's obsession with the mother in society. Lear's implied sexual demand from his daughters is a specifically erotic affection, similar to Freud's Oedipus complex, as everybody is aware, but with the important difference here that in Lear's case it is reversed. This reverse erotic fixation can be called the adult libido, or more specifically, the Lear complex, which is in any specific attachment of the father for his daughter. Lear's tendency toward his daughters is an adult libido, as I mentioned, and so which surfaces in a most unlikely time and location. His rage after Cordelia's rejection of the unconditional love makes him behave like a temperamental, fiery, and imperious suitor. It can be understood that when Lear was busy with the affairs of his country, he suppressed any free and explicit expression of emotion in himself, which resulted in the resurfacing in an improper time, as it shows. Now that Lear has unburdened himself, it seems, of the state responsibilities, he wants to make sure that he will receive what he has been denied for a long time. Lear's asking for love and affection from his daughters has a more complicated reason, I think, than Oedipus complex or even Lear complex. So if we use Kristeva's theories, so it can be understood that, it can be suggested actually that now that Lear aims to retire from his social responsibilities, having been assigned to him by the symbolic structure of the society during adulthood, he unconsciously perhaps feels an urgent need to take refuge in the semiotic, where he will be able to experience his second childishness. By dividing his realm and giving his title away, Lear says farewell to the symbolic identity and the restrictions associated with it. No longer does he aim to protect his borders, but rather he leaves them open and his identity exposed, giving an easy target for the abject. He wishes to travel back to the time he was associated with the semiotic, a time he was loved unconditionally, considering himself free of the duties imposed on him by the symbolic. Lear demands that his daughters express their deepest affections to him. Now I turn to the choking mother within Lear. Upon reaching Gloucester's house, a scene in the play, King Lear finds Kent, his loyal servant, in the stocks, which is a humiliation. And he gets mad and angry. On realizing that Regan is of the same metal as Goneril, he, in an experience of mixed feelings of rage, shame, and loss, Lear woefully remarks, "Oh, how this mother swells up toward my heart, hysterica passio, down thou climbing sorrow, thy elements below." Lear thinks of himself as having the disease of the hysta, or the womb. The mother was another common name for the disease at the time. The disease of the womb, or the mother, the sickness, the term carried the connotative meaning of the suffocation with itself. Hysteria carried with itself a long history of feminine associations with infirmity and skittishness. The only remedy to put this ambivalent and recalcitrant force under control was marriage and regular sexual intercourse. This prescription aimed to put the wandering womb under the control, under male control. However, in the event of any sign of weakness in male authority, the fear of the return of the suffocating mother was always anticipated. After seeing Kent in the stocks, which is an obvious sign of ingratitude for his daughter, Lear has a peculiar sense, a feeling of suffocation. It can be understood if I read the line. At this moment, Shakespeare shows us the place of the repressed mother who refuses to stay in her proper place. She tends up the very center of masculine identity in Lear's own body. With his symbolic power in the hands of his daughters, no longer is Lear able to put the recalcitrant womb in his place. It is going to overwhelm him with its suffocating power. So, if we turn to Kristeva, so from a Kristevan perspective, what Lear feels after seeing the daughter's mistreatment is the bitter truth of his first encounter with the horror of the abject mother. He ignored the horror during the zenith of his royal power, for he was equipped with symbolic identity that made him immune against any such threats. It can be said that Lear did not undergo a normal separation from his mother, and the imprint of the semiotic has stayed with him during his adult life. Lear had to leave his mother because of the fear of being sucked back to her womb through the canal or the scar. These are the terms that Kristeva uses for the mother's sexual organ. The fear of being sucked back to the womb acts as a permanent threat and continues to haunt an individual in his adulthood. Lear managed to escape the threats of suffocating mother, and by establishing a strong symbolic border, succeeded in keeping it away from his adult subject. By saying, "Oh me, my heart, my rising heart," but down, Lear begins to feel the choking effect of the woman inside him. What is hurting him within is the return of the abject, the repressed and suppressed semiotic, which, like a recalcitrant womb, is finding its way to his chest and aiming to suffocate Lear. The darkest version of the suffocating mother reveals itself to Lear in the storm. Lear rushes out to the storm in an attempt to flee his feminizing emotions, but gets stuck in the feminine rage. His naked body is vulnerable to the punitive mother, and so is his masculine power, which is no match for the raging storm. Taking refuge in the storm, I believe Lear rushes out to confront what is inside him. Inside a female force that shakes his manhood. He smells the stench of the sulphurous vaginal pit. He does not let Gloucester kiss his hand, for it smells of mortality. Trying to wipe the stench off his hand is his last attempt to suppress the feminine in himself, but it is of no use. He seems to come into terms with the bitter truth that despite his attempts to suppress his presence in himself, its presence, the mother's presence in himself, he has always known that that pit was always with him. His rush into the storm was in part once more an attempt to avoid that knowledge. Kristeva considers filth and defilement as proper examples of the abject. They exist, Kristeva argued, on the margin of any symbolic structure. Filth and defilement, Kristeva says, exist around us. They are aloof because they threaten our being. The abject is not limited to tangible objects like filth and waste. It can be applied to circumstances like the shame of compromise, of being in the middle of treachery, as Kristeva says. This fits Lear's situation, in my opinion. His elder daughters flaunt his miserable condition before the world and make him encounter the abject, which is a confrontation that threatens the identity and leads to his death. By the same token, the feminine inside him, which is symbolically shown in the form of filth in his hands, can be regarded as inevitable occurrence of the abject, which is close and bothering him to a degree that takes him to the verge of madness. Lear gets mad. Lear is overwhelmed by the abject, and there is no way to escape. The abject is everywhere, both inside and outside his body. By inside, I mean the woman inside his body. The outside is the storm. Lear staying the night out in the storm provides the ground for him to coexist with the abject. Kristeva remarked that the time of abjection is double. The time of oblivion and thunder, of veiled infinity, and the moment when revelation bursts forth. In the time of storm and thunder, Lear, facing the inseparable and unhealthy part of himself, comes into terms with the truth that the abject from which he does not cease separating from him. In short, a land of oblivion. During the storm, Lear's psychosis takes another turn for the worse. He loses all contact with reality, regresses into a psychotic version of the same visual fantasy world he was associated with in the semiotic stage. The thunder is the outcome of two opposite charges, the symbolic and the semiotic. The clash between the symbolic and the semiotic, Kristeva remarks, would involve bringing together the two opposite terms, but on account of that flash is discharged like thunder. Lear's final reunion with Cordelia is the time when, in his second childishness state, he has a return to the semiotic. Fleeing the two sisters with their objective qualities caught up in the storm, Lear finds Cordelia a safe haven in which he seeks shelter. Being with Cordelia gives him again the chance to experience again the unconditional and unlimited love and affection associated with his pre-Oedipal stage. He feels at home in this safe haven and does not want to leave it, since all is waiting for him is the symbolic world, full of fear, full of threats, full of treachery, compromise. He does not want to return to this great stage of fools. The joy of the maternal body's company promises Lear a blissful experience, even in prison. Come, let's away, as he says, let's go to prison. A little child has the pre-Oedipal time limit and must sooner or later, as Kristeva says, leave the site of original being and enter the symbolic. In his second childishness state, however, Lear wants to stay. Lear does not want to leave. Lear has another choice in order to avoid the symbolic, to die. In the final stage of the process of his individuation, Lear's death marks the abjection of his being. His abjection promises peace for the realm, a promising future achieved at the price of the maternal body. So, in short, King Lear tells the story of the process of the individuation of a king whose second childishness brings loss and trouble for his realm. His character shows signs of flaw when he transfers his symbolic identity to his elder daughters, who act as suffocating mothers, using Edelman's phrase, and aims to terminate his identity. Stripped of his power, he begins to suffer from the annihilating force of the feminine inside and outside his body to a degree that brings on madness. During the storm, Lear is ironically inside what is inside him, and he comes to understand his grave mistake in objective what in all truth was his nurturing mother. Cordelia's return puts an end to these threats of the choking mother. However, her offering Lear the unconditional love he longed for comes at a price. Cordelia is sacrificed to make Lear's individuation cycle complete. With second childishness as its last stage, in the seventh stage of his life, Lear is given the chance to enjoy living in the semiotic phase again. The old Lear decides to stay in this safe haven and will not return to the real world, even if it costs him his own life and also the life of his beloved mother figure, Cordelia. I tried to be short. Sorry that I bored you. It's all good.
Thank you so much. Do we have a few minutes for questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Thank you. This may be something that you addressed more than I could tell, but because it's Skype, I am not sure if this was spoken of. You're talking about sort of a return to the sort of maternal space of childhood, the choric space, which is associated with the semiotic, and then you're also talking about Lear's abjection. Or I think that you were speaking of Lear's abjection, and I wonder what is the relationship between the sort of process or dynamic thing that is an abjection, the phenomenon of abjection. Where is that situated in relationship to, like maybe temporally or psychoanalytically, structurally, in relationship to his return to childhood? Does the abjection affect that, or is abjection separate from his return to the aura or semiotic?
Thank you. So my understanding is that what you're remarking is that at the same time I'm talking of abjection and also the returning to the semiotic state. So these two terms are contradictory. So you're right. Actually, in my viva, also the external examiner talked about this, and I tried to convince him by saying that Kristeva says the abject is something most of the time, as far as it has a link to the mother. It is something that you have to throw away in order to acquire a kind of symbolic identity. But at the same time, actually, you're weak against that. It is something that reminds you of a very distant past about which you have not a clear idea. So when in normal situations we try to stay away from the abject, something that must be abjected. Unlike Freud, Kristeva says that the abject does not fade away. It stays around, it hovers, it does not go, and it is in search of sign of weakness in us. So when we show signs of weakness, when we fall in love, when we get upset, when we are depressed, or in case of Lear, when we get angry. And so anger is Lear's flaw, and so when he gets angry, so the abject starts to penetrate. The abject starts to come inside. What he has objected throughout the course of his adult life, when he was the king of a very big kingdom, so he managed to actually stay away. But at that particular time, when he unburdened himself of the symbolic identity, he got weak. And when he got angry, he got weaker. And so when you get weak, so you wish some things that you do not normally wish when you are in a normal condition. That was my understanding. So these are contradictory, but as long as and as far as the abject is something that with whom or with which we have ambivalent relationship, I thought it makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to pass on to the next paper because we're otherwise Carol won't have enough time to speak. But thank you so much. So our final paper will be presented by Carol Bobet, who is a professor of English at the University of Pittsburgh. And her paper will be entitled Kristeva's Impact on Film Studies in Days, Orson Welles, and David Lynch.